It was close to midnight when I finally left my sister's house. A long drive ahead and the kind of quiet that makes you rethink late-night travel. The highway stretched out like a black ribbon under weak streetlights, empty and endless. I'd done this trip countless times before from Albuquerque to Flagstaff, but that night the air felt heavier somehow, like the sky was pressing down. As I remember rolling down my window for a bit of breeze, hearing nothing but the hum of my tires and the faint rattle of a loose cup holder. It was one of those drives where your own thoughts get too loud and the silence feels almost alive. About an hour in, the landscape flattened into desert. No exits for miles, just dark sand and telephone poles that looked like they were marching beside me. That's when I saw headlights in my mirror, distant at first, two perfect circles growing brighter. It was a relief at first, knowing someone else was out there. I turned up the radio, some old station fading in and out, and kept an eye on those lights. But after 10 minutes, they were still there. Same distance, same glow. Not gaining, not falling back, just there. I tried changing lanes, slowing down, even speeding up a bit. The car behind me mirrored every move. I told myself it was just coincidence, another tired traveler on the same route, but the longer it went on, the less it felt random. The highway dipped and curved, and each time I checked, those lights stayed perfectly aligned in the mirror like they were tethered to me. My chest tightened a little, though I kept telling myself not to be stupid. There are lots of night drivers who zone out, right? I turned off the radio to focus, and in that sudden quiet, the world felt smaller. The hum of the tires, the whisper of wind against the glass, the faint ticking of my blinker, they all sounded too clear, like I was hearing everything at once. After nearly 40 minutes, I approached a long stretch of road where the horizon disappeared completely into darkness. I glanced up again and the headlights were gone, just like that, not dimmed, not turned off, gone. The space behind me was pure black. I blinked a few times, leaned forward to check for elevation changes, even turned on my high beams. Nothing. I exhaled, trying to laugh it off, but it didn't feel funny. It felt wrong, like something had shifted when I wasn't looking. I thought about pulling over but decided against it. The shoulder was too narrow, and my gut told me to keep driving. 10 minutes later, I caught myself checking the mirror too often. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop. Every few seconds, my eyes flicked up, searching for those lights again. The darkness behind me seemed too thick, like it was waiting for something. I took another breath, rubbed my temple, and told myself to relax. That's when I noticed something, a faint outline in the reflection. Not bright, not clear, just a darker shape inside my own back seat. I blinked hard, thinking it was a trick of light or maybe my jacket slung across the seat. But when I adjusted the mirror, the outline didn't shift. It stayed exactly where a person would sit, slightly lined to the left still. I remember that moment so vividly, the sound of my own breathing, shallow and uneven. I didn't turn around right away. Every instinct screamed to look, but another part of me, the quieter, colder part, knew that if I did, I might see something I couldn't unsee. Instead, I kept driving, gripping the wheel so tight my hands hurt. My eyes flicked between the mirror and the road, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But then the air changed. The back seat felt colder, like the AC had kicked on even though it hadn't. I could hear a faint, steady sound like fabric shifting or the quietest exhale. I wanted to believe it was the car creaking, but I knew that sound. It was breathing, slow, human, and close. I whispered something, maybe a prayer, maybe a plea, and forced myself to glance again. The shape was clearer now, a shadow too solid to be a trick. My mouth went dry. I couldn't see a face, but I could feel eyes, watching, waiting. I tried to speak, to say something like, "Who's there?" but my voice didn't work. The road blurred for a moment, my vision tunneling. Then a sign appeared ahead, a rest stop 2 miles. I focused on that sign like it was salvation. So I didn't dare look back again until I pulled into the lot, parked under the only working light, and killed the engine. As the car went silent, I didn't move for a full minute listening. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like sound. Slowly, I turned around. The back seat was empty, nothing but my jacket and an old coffee cup. I laughed, half crazy, the kind of laugh that comes from relief and disbelief colliding. But when I reached for the jacket, I froze. There were faint smudges on the seat, not dirt, not stains, but the kind of marks someone's shoes might leave if they'd been sitting there facing forward for a long time. I ran my fingers over them, but they were dry. Old somehow. I stepped out of the car, breathing the cold desert air, trying to shake off the feeling. The night was utterly still. No other vehicles, no wind, not even crickets, just the buzzing of that single streetlight above me. I walked around the car, shining my phone's flashlight over the back seat again, the windows, the ground. That's when I noticed something faintly reflective in the dust near my rear tire, a partial footprint. Bare, small, and pressed deep into the sand, as if someone had just stepped out moments ago. So I got back in, locked every door, and drove the rest of the way home without stopping once. I didn't look in the rearview mirror again that night. In fact, for months afterward, I angled it slightly upward so I wouldn't have to see the back seat. People laugh when I tell them that, say it must have been fatigue or a shadow or an overactive imagination. Maybe they're right. But sometimes, on long drives, when the road is quiet and the world feels too big, I still catch myself glancing up, half expecting to see those headlights again, and the faint outline of someone who was never supposed to be there. It was sometime after 2 in the morning when I got the call to check a report of a pedestrian on Route 19. Most of those calls turn out to be nothing: a bag of trash caught in the wind, a stray dog, or someone's imagination trying to make sense of headlights in fog. But I remember that night vividly because of how still everything was. No wind, no other cars, just that thick, muffled silence that sometimes settles over the highway like a blanket. I'd been a highway patrol officer for 11 years by then. I'd seen wrecks, fires, everything, but I'd never seen her until that night. The dispatcher said the caller was a trucker passing through the northbound lane, claimed he saw a woman walking barefoot along the divider near mile marker 142. I didn't think much of it. That stretch was empty desert, nothing but sand and cracked asphalt for 30 miles. No reason for anyone to be walking there. Still, procedure was procedure. I drove out, my headlights carving a narrow path through the fog. My radio hissed quietly in the background, and the hum of the tires felt almost hypnotic. There's something about driving alone at night that messes with your sense of distance. Every minute feels longer than it is. I slowed as I approached the marker. The fog was dense enough that I had to lean forward, squinting. And then I saw it, a faint shape at the edge of the divider, pale and still. I thought it was an animal at first, maybe a deer or someone's lost blanket, but as I got closer, the shape straightened. A woman, barefoot, wearing a white dress that looked too thin for the cold. Her hair was long, dark, and tangled, swaying slightly even though there was no wind. I rolled to a stop and switched on my spotlight, angling it toward her. She didn't move, didn't flinch at the brightness. Just stood there, looking straight ahead across the highway as if watching something invisible. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out, calling out to her, "Ma'am, are you all right?" My voice sounded too loud in that empty air. She didn't answer. I called again, stepping closer, the gravel crunching under my boots. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. There was something off about her stillness, not fear, not confusion, just absence. Like she was there, but not really there. When I was about 10 feet away, she finally turned her head. Her face was pale but calm. Eyes open and unfocused, as if she was looking past me or through me. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need help?" I asked again. She blinked slowly, and for a moment I thought she was going to speak. Instead, she took one step back and then another until she was standing right at the edge of the divider. I remember holding my hand out, saying, "Don't move, stay right there," but she kept stepping backward, her bare feet leaving faint prints in the dirt. The fog thickened suddenly, swallowing the light, and in that moment she disappeared, just gone, like the night had taken her back. I ran forward, sweeping the flashlight beam in every direction. Nothing, just the empty highway stretching out into gray mist. I radioed in, told dispatch I had a possible missing person, maybe in shock, possibly injured. Backup was on its way. I stayed there, walking up and down the divider, my flashlight catching on bits of gravel and weeds. That's when I saw something small glinting near the edge of the asphalt, a locket, old and tarnished, half buried in the dirt. I picked it up carefully, brushing off the dust. Inside was a faded black and white photo of a woman holding a baby. Her smile was faint but familiar. I couldn't place it, but something about her face lingered. When backup arrived 15 minutes later, I told them everything. We searched both sides of the highway, the surrounding ditch, even the old drainage tunnel nearby. There was no trace, not even footprints. Back at the station, I logged the incident, placed the locket in evidence. One of the older officers, Henderson, overheard me describing her and went quiet. After a pause, he said, "You saw her too, didn't you?" I didn't understand what he meant. He explained that years ago, before I joined, there had been a crash on that same stretch. A woman and her young daughter. Car hit the divider, flipped, caught fire. The driver who caused it was never found. Every few years, someone reports seeing a barefoot woman near that spot, always around the same time of year. Always walking along the divider, calm and silent. Most officers dismiss it as coincidence or stress. Henderson didn't. He said he'd stopped to help her once long ago and that she looked exactly as I described. I didn't know what to think. I asked for the crash report, and when I pulled up the photos, I froze. The woman in the picture wasn't just similar, it was her. Same dark hair, same dress, even the same faint scar near her collarbone. And in one of the recovered items from the wreck, there it was. The same locket listed as destroyed in the fire. But I had it clean and intact, sitting in the evidence drawer. I must have read that line 5 times, each word sinking deeper than the last. So when I went back to look at it again the next morning, the drawer was empty. No record of it being moved. No one else had touched it. For a while, I tried to explain it away, maybe fatigue, maybe memory playing tricks on me. But every time I drive that route now, I slow near mile marker 142, even if I'm not on duty, even if I'm just passing through. Sometimes, when the fog rolls low and the night gets still enough, I swear I see movement along the divider. A pale shape in the distance, walking barefoot, always facing the same direction. I never stop anymore. I keep driving, eyes fixed ahead, heart steady but heavy. It's because deep down, I know what I saw. And I know that somewhere along that empty highway, a woman is still walking, looking for something she never got to find. I've been a truck driver for nearly 20 years now, and in all that time, I've learned one thing: the highway at night is a different world. It's not the same place you drive through in the daylight. The exits feel farther apart, the signs seem older, and even your radio sounds a little distorted, like it's picking up voices from somewhere else. That's how it felt the night I took exit 47, a turnoff that, as far as anyone knows, doesn't actually exist. It was early autumn, and I was hauling a load of construction materials across the Midwest. I'd been on the road for 14 hours straight, too stubborn to stop and too wired on gas station coffee to feel tired. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of dim orange light, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only living thing left in the world. The air outside was heavy, a mix of fog and mist that clung to the windshield even after the wipers passed. I remember thinking how strange it was that my GPS kept losing signal in that area. No service, no bars, no nothing, just static on the CB and the low hum of the tires on asphalt. Around 2:15 a.m., I saw a sign I'd never noticed before. Exit 47, service station 2 miles. That surprised me because I knew that stretch of road by heart. I'd driven it at least 20 times before, and there wasn't supposed to be an exit for another 30 miles. I figured maybe they'd built a new rest stop or truck plaza since the last time I'd been through. Either way, I could use a break. My hands were cramping on the steering wheel, and I hadn't eaten anything since Kansas City. So when the off-ramp appeared out of the fog, clean pavement, new signage, everything looking freshly built, I took it. The ramp curved longer than usual, dipping into what looked like a small valley. My headlights swept over patches of trees and cracked fencing, and then suddenly the road leveled out into a straight stretch that led to a service station glowing faintly in the mist. The sign flickered gas food lodging, though only gas stayed fully lit. The station itself looked old-fashioned, like something from the 1970s, with metal pumps and a single fluorescent light humming above the canopy. But the air was still, the ground was dry, and for some reason the place didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. I parked near the first pump and cut the engine. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the usual ticks of a cooling engine sounded too loud. When I stepped out, the air hit me cold, damp, but without wind. It had that strange, motionless feeling right before a thunderstorm, except there wasn't a single cloud visible in the sky, just fog. I waited for the sound of crickets or maybe the buzz of a power line. Nothing, not even the faint hum of electricity from the lights. Just the soft flicker on and off like a heartbeat. The office door was open, a faint bell above it chiming once as I stepped inside. The smell hit first dust, gasoline, and something metallic underneath. The counter was empty, though the lights inside were all working. Behind the glass shelves were old candy bars, faded soda cans, even an ashtray with a cigarette still resting on its edge, half burned down. It looked like someone had just stepped away a few minutes ago. I called out, "Anyone here?" My voice echoed strangely, like the sound took a second longer to bounce back than it should have. A moment later, I heard movement from the back, soft, deliberate. Then a figure appeared in the doorway behind the counter, a man tall and thin wearing a stained mechanic's uniform with no name tag. His face was calm, unreadable. He looked at me for a few seconds before speaking in a quiet, slow voice. "Pump number two's good," he said, motioning with one hand. "Just keep your lights on while you fill, don't turn them off." His tone wasn't threatening, more like advice. I hesitated, waiting for him to say something else, but he didn't. Just turned around and disappeared back into the office behind him. I walked back outside, uneasy. My truck looked strange under the canopy light, its paint seemed duller, its chrome darker. I opened the tank, started the pump, and glanced at the price screen. It showed nothing. No numbers, no digital display, not even a sound of fuel moving. I tapped it once and it flickered faintly, displaying a single word before cutting out again, "Keep lights on." My pulse quickened. I glanced toward the office, but the window was empty now, no sign of the man. Just the faint reflection of my own headlights. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe the station was half automated or running some old local system. When the pump clicked off, I replaced the nozzle, climbed back into the cab, and put the truck in gear. But before I could pull out, I noticed something. The road ahead of me wasn't the same one I'd driven in on. The fog had thickened, and where I expected the exit ramp, there was now a narrow, two-lane road lined with dead trees. The sign pointing back to the highway was gone. I froze for a moment, staring through the windshield, then shifted into drive. Maybe it looped around, I thought. Maybe it all connected back to the main highway. I drove slowly, headlights cutting through the fog, trying to find a landmark. After 5 minutes, I realized something was wrong. The road wasn't looping anywhere, it just kept going straight. The trees on both sides looked identical, like they were repeating. I checked my odometer. I'd gone nearly 8 miles and still no sign of a turn, no lights, no other cars. That's when I saw movement in the mirror, faint headlights behind me, distant at first, then closer. I exhaled, relieved. Another driver. But the relief didn't last. The lights were too close together, like two motorcycle beams instead of a car, and they weren't bouncing like headlights on uneven ground. They were gliding, steady, and almost slow. I pressed the accelerator slightly, trying to gain some distance. The lights matched my speed perfectly. I felt my chest tighten, a strange pressure building behind my ribs. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the lights vanished. I pulled over immediately, leaving the truck idling, headlights blazing through the fog. My hands were shaking when I reached for the map in the glove box. That's when I saw it, the green road sign, half buried in the fog just ahead. I hadn't noticed it before. I got out, walked toward it slowly, and wiped the grime off with my sleeve. It read Exit 47, closed since 1989. My stomach dropped. I turned back toward my truck, but it wasn't there. The lights, the engine, the sound gone, just the quiet hiss of fog against the pavement. I stood there for a moment, frozen, unsure if I was dreaming. Then I heard something behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate crunching on gravel. I turned, but all I saw was the faint outline of the service station in the distance again, glowing dimly as if waiting for me to come back. I blinked once and it was gone. I don't remember how I got back on the main highway. When I opened my eyes again, the sun was rising, my truck parked on the shoulder, the engine still running. My GPS signal had returned, showing I was only 20 minutes from my delivery point. I checked the odometer and it showed the same mileage as the night before, as if I'd never left the highway at all. But the gas tank was full, completely full. When I stopped at the next real service station later that morning, I asked about exit 47. The cashier, an older guy who'd worked there for decades, just looked at me funny and said, "That exit washed out 30 years ago. Nobody's used it since." I wanted to argue, to explain what I'd seen, but instead I just nodded and left. Now whenever I drive through that stretch at night, I make sure my tank's full long before I get there. And even if I'm running low, I don't stop. Because sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the road signs start to flicker, I catch the faint outline of a ramp just up ahead with a sign that still reads Exit 47. So no matter how tired I am, I always drive right past. It was late fall when it happened, the kind of season when the sky always looks gray even on clear days, and the air carries that quiet weight before winter. I'd just gotten a new job about 2 hours away from home, and I was still commuting back every weekend until I could move. That stretch of highway between my old town and the city had become a kind of second home, familiar, predictable, always half empty after sunset. I knew every turn, every gas station, every broken guardrail. So when I saw the car behind me that night, I noticed it right away, not because it was following too close, but because it looked exactly like mine. At first, it almost made me laugh. Same model, same color, even the same missing hubcap on the back right wheel. It's not rare to see another gray sedan on the road, but it's strange to see one that mirrors your own damage. I remember glancing at it in the rearview mirror a few times, thinking maybe it was just coincidence. But the longer I drove, the less I could convince myself. Every lane change I made, it made. Is every time I sped up to pass a slower car. It did too, always staying 2 car lengths behind, headlights steady and unblinking. The road was quiet that night, and the rhythm of the tires on the asphalt had lulled me into that half-focused trance drivers get after hours alone. But the longer it stayed behind me, the harder it became to ignore. My phone buzzed with a notification, and when I glanced at it, I noticed the reflection of the other car in my rear window. The light shimmered across the metal, same dent in the trunk, same sticker on the left side of the bumper. A faded college decal. My college. It's the one I'd scraped off my own car months ago. That's when the laughter stopped. I slowed a little to see if it would pass, but it didn't. It stayed perfectly behind me, matching every move. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe someone from the same area, same make of car, same taste. But when I pulled into the rest stop near the state line, the car did too. I watched it in the mirror, my fingers tightening on the steering wheel. It parked 2 rows behind me, facing the opposite direction. Not close enough to feel like a confrontation, but close enough to feel intentional. I left the engine running while I decided whether to get out. The rest stop was half-lit, the fluorescent bulbs humming with that constant electric buzz. A vending machine blinked in the corner, no one else around. I took a breath, stepped out, and kept my eyes forward. I told myself to walk normally, don't rush, don't look back. I used the restroom, washed my hands, tried to shake off the weirdness. When I came out, the lot was empty except for my car. The other one was gone. I remember the relief hitting me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I laughed under my breath, embarrassed at myself for being so paranoid. I got back on the road, the highway stretching ahead like a dark river, and put on some music to fill the silence. About 20 minutes later, I saw it again. The same car, same headlights, same steady distance. I checked my mirrors 3 times just to be sure. The college sticker glinted in the beam of a passing truck. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was someone else heading the same way. Maybe the car I saw earlier wasn't the same one I just thought it was, but the way it stayed behind me, it was too precise. I took the next exit, a small one leading through a 2-lane road bordered by empty fields, just to test it. The car followed. Every turn, every bend. My chest tightened, and I realized I was gripping the wheel hard enough that my palms had gone slick with sweat. The fog started to roll in then, thick and low, cutting the world down to the length of my headlights. The road curved through an old industrial area, the kind with forgotten warehouses and flickering streetlights. I slowed, heart pounding, and the car behind me slowed too. The glow of its headlights filled my mirrors like a halo. I couldn't see the driver, not even a silhouette, just that faint reflection of my own back window. I remember whispering out loud, "Who are you?" even though I didn't expect an answer. The next intersection was a dead end, a looping cul-de-sac for trucks to turn around. I took it, thinking if I pulled off maybe they'd pass me. I turned in, parked on the side, engine idling. The car followed, slowed, and came to a stop directly across from me, facing me. For a few seconds we just sat there, 2 identical cars, engines low and humming, fog curling between us. The headlights flickered once like a blink and then went out. My stomach dropped. I stared into that darkness for what felt like a full minute, not daring to move. Then slowly my headlights dimmed, not turned off, but dimmed like something was draining the power. The radio crackled with static and the air grew colder. The windshield started to fog from the inside, even though the heater was still on. That's when I saw movement, not from the other car, but from my back seat. Just a shift, barely perceptible, but enough to make me freeze. A shadow that hadn't been there before. I didn't look back, I couldn't. Every nerve in my body screamed to keep my eyes forward. I shifted the car into reverse, slammed the pedal, and turned the wheel hard until I was back on the main road. My tires screeched against the pavement and the fog swallowed everything behind me. I drove until I saw lights again, real ones, from an open diner off the next exit. When I pulled into the parking lot, I turned off the engine and finally looked behind me. The back seat was empty. As I sat there for a long time, just breathing, staring into that space. The air still felt cold, heavier somehow, like the smell of wet metal. When I finally worked up the nerve to drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in that car anymore, that something had followed me out of the fog. The next morning, I checked my car in daylight. Everything looked normal except for one thing, a thin horizontal scratch running across my trunk, as if another car's bumper had pressed against it, perfectly aligned. I brushed my hand over it and noticed something faintly stuck to the edge, a tiny piece of a faded sticker, a college decal, the same one I'd scraped off months ago. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just debris or coincidence. But sometimes when I'm driving at night and the road's empty for miles, I still see faint headlights appear behind me, not too close, not too far, just enough to remind me they're there. And I don't check the mirror anymore, not fully. Because deep down, I already know what I'll see. A car that looks exactly like mine, following me quietly through the dark, waiting for me to look back. I used to be one of those truckers who lived more on the road than at home. You lose track of time out there, days blending into miles, radio chatter becoming your only company. Back then, before smartphones and satellite everything, we used CB radios to talk. Channel 19 was where you'd find everyone, drivers swapping road updates, jokes, or just passing the time. It was a strange kind of comfort, that constant murmur of voices on the line. The hum of the engine, the crackle of static, and the low rhythm of a stranger's drawl in your ear could make you feel less alone in the middle of nowhere. That comfort didn't last forever, though. Not after what I heard on Channel 19 that winter night in '97. I was driving through the Nevada desert, somewhere between Ely and Tonopah. Long, straight stretches of highway under a sky so dark you could see every star if you bothered to look. My headlights only touched the road ahead, a ghostly tunnel of white in a sea of black. The radio was quiet except for the occasional burst of static. I remember tapping the side of it with my knuckle, trying to bring a signal through. A few moments later, a voice broke through the fuzz, faint, uneven, like it was underwater. Has anyone copies mile marker 73? Need help. The voice was so weak it almost blended with the static. I leaned closer, adjusting the squelch dial until it came through a little clearer. It was a man, young, maybe mid-20s, his voice trembling like he'd been crying or freezing. Can anybody hear me? I crashed. I can't get out. At first, I thought it was a prank. You get a lot of bored drivers pulling stunts like that late at night. But something about his tone got under my skin, too raw, too panicked to fake. I pressed the mic. Breaker 19, I copy you. This is Highway Dog. You said 73, you injured buddy. There was silence, then static again, longer this time. And just when I was about to let go of the mic, I heard him whisper, "Please, tell her I'm sorry." The channel went dead. I sat there for a few seconds, my pulse quickening, waiting for him to come back, nothing but static. I checked my map, mile marker 73 wasn't far, maybe 15 miles ahead. I figured maybe he'd lost power or signal. I radioed dispatch, but they brushed it off, no calls, no reports of an accident in the area. I couldn't shake the feeling, though. So I decided to check for myself. The desert at night has a strange way of swallowing sound. The hum of my tires on the pavement was the only thing breaking the silence. As I got closer to 73, I started scanning the sides of the road with my high beams. Nothing, no skid marks, no broken rail, no lights, just sand, rock, and the dark. Still, I slowed down, eyes straining to see anything out of place. And then I saw it, a shimmer of light, faint and bluish, maybe 50 yards off the road. I pulled over and stepped out. The cold hit me like a slap. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked toward the light, which I realized was reflecting off a shattered windshield half buried in the dirt. The wreck was old, rusted, tires flat, windows broken, a late 80s pickup long abandoned. I shone my flashlight through the driver's window. The inside was empty except for an old jacket slumped over the seat and a long-cooled thermos on the floor. While the license plate was so faded I couldn't make out the numbers. For a moment I just stood there listening. The wind was still, but the CB inside my truck hissed faintly even from where I was standing. And then through the static the voice came again, faint but clear enough this time. Mile marker 73, please, I can't get out. As I froze, the sound was coming from my cab. I ran back, half convinced someone had hijacked the frequency. When I climbed in, the radio light was flickering, something I'd never seen before. I grabbed the mic. Whoever you are, I hear you loud and clear. What's your 20? Oh, static, then I can see your lights. My eyes shot up to the mirror, half expecting to see someone behind me. Nothing but open highway. Say again, I asked, voice unsteady. As a long pause, then faintly, don't go. The radio went dead again. No static this time, just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. I tried scanning other channels, but every frequency was empty, even the trucker chatter from earlier. I drove another mile, checking behind me every few seconds. That's when I noticed it, mile marker 73 again. I had already passed it, but there it was on my right side, glowing faintly in my headlights. I slowed down, blinked hard, trying to convince myself I made a mistake. Maybe there was another one, maybe the numbering was off. But as I drove another half mile, there it was again. 73. The same bent sign, the same patch of sand. Something inside me tightened. I grabbed the mic again, hands shaking slightly. Breaker 19, anyone out there? I waited, nothing. Then, just as I was about to switch it off, the voice came back, quieter this time, barely audible beneath the static. He's still here. That was enough for me. I floored it, the engine roaring louder than I'd ever heard it. The highway blurred into darkness, the mile markers flashing by until I finally saw 74. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. I kept going until I reached a truck stop about 40 miles ahead. Inside, the bright fluorescent lights felt unreal, too sharp after so much darkness. I told the clerk what had happened. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You must have picked up the old frequency, happened before." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. There was a wreck back in 78, same spot. Pickup flipped off the road, caught fire, driver didn't make it. They used to hear his call for help for years after, same channel. Some said it was stuck in the airwaves. He shrugged. Haven't heard it in a long time, though. So I wanted to believe it was some leftover recording or interference. But when I got back to my truck, I noticed something I hadn't before, a thin layer of sand across the hood, as if I'd been parked off-road for a long time. And on the passenger seat, right beside the mic, was an old, rusted CB handset, identical to mine. I threw it out the next morning, switched to a new radio, a new rig, and never touched Channel 19 again. But sometimes, when I drive through long, empty stretches late at night, I'll hear faint static creep through even with the radio off, like something waiting for me to answer. And every time it happens, I keep my eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, and whisper under my breath, "I can't help you." It's because whatever is calling out from mile marker 73 isn't asking for rescue anymore. I drive the same route to work every morning, a long, empty stretch of highway that cuts through farmland before merging into the city. It's one of those in-between roads where nothing ever seems to change. The same faded billboards, the same leaning fence posts, the same gas station 30 miles down that no one ever stops at. The kind of place that feels frozen in time. For years, it's been routine coffee in the cup holder, radio low, the sun just starting to climb. But a few months ago, I started noticing something new along that drive. A car parked in the median. The first time I saw it, I barely registered it. It was early morning, mist clinging to the fields, and the car sat off to the side, half on the grass, half on the gravel divider. Old model, maybe from the 90s, coated in dust. No lights on, no movement, just there. I remember thinking maybe it had broken down overnight or someone had abandoned it. That happens. I drove past without another thought. But the next morning it was still there. Same position, same angle. And for some reason, that got my attention. Cars don't just sit like that for days. By the third morning, I started to slow down as I passed it. The windows were tinted, but from what I could see, the inside looked empty. There was a thin layer of dirt creeping up the tires and weeds brushing against the bumper. I made a mental note to report it when I got to work, just in case someone had left it there after an accident. But that day was busy, and by the time I remembered, I'd already forgotten which mile marker it was near. The next day, though, I made sure to look again. Well, the car hadn't moved an inch. What started to bother me wasn't the car itself, but how untouched it looked. No boot marks in the grass, no broken glass, no sign of police tape or chalk lines, just a vehicle suspended in time. A few days later, I started paying closer attention. Every morning the car was there, same angle, same silence. Then one evening, driving home later than usual, I noticed something different. The car's headlights were on. It was dusk, the kind of light where the sky glows but the ground's already gone dark. The beams weren't bright, more like a dim pulse, flickering every few seconds as if the battery was dying. I slowed down, rolled my window halfway and listened. Nothing, not even the hum of an idling engine, just those faint, tired flashes of light. When I passed, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw them blink one last time before going completely dark. I couldn't stop thinking about it that night. The next morning, I checked again. The car was back to how it had been before, dead, silent, coated in dust. But when I looked closer, I noticed something I hadn't before. The driver's door was slightly open, just an inch or two, but enough to show the shadowed gap of the interior. That unsettled me more than I'd like to admit. Over the next week, I started leaving earlier, telling myself I just wanted to catch better light for the drive. Truth was, I wanted to see if anything changed. And it did. The door that had been ajar was now closed again, but the car was facing the opposite direction, not turned slightly, completely reversed, as if it had somehow rotated overnight. I nearly slammed my brakes. There was no way that could have happened without someone moving it, and yet there were no tracks, no signs of towing, nothing. Just the same car, perfectly placed. I told a coworker about it later that day. He laughed and said maybe the state had cleared it and someone else had left a new one there. I wanted to believe that, but deep down it didn't feel right. There wasn't another abandoned car nearby, no sign of replacement. It was the same one, same cracked rearview mirror, same faded sticker on the back window, a little sun with smiling rays. The kind of decal people used to buy at gas stations decades ago. The following morning, I decided to stop. I pulled onto the shoulder across from it, hazard lights blinking, and got out. The air was cold, sharper than usual. The highway around me was empty, just the sound of wind and the ticking of my car's engine cooling. I crossed slowly, gravel crunching under my shoes. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. There was no smell of fuel, no rust, no heat radiating from the hood, just stillness. I looked through the window. The inside was cleaner than I expected, a purse on the passenger seat, a few receipts scattered near the console, and something hanging from the rearview mirror. A keychain shaped like a small silver bell. When I leaned closer, I could just make out the license plate. It was covered in dust, but I could see part of the number. It started with the same 3 digits as mine. I backed away slowly, heart knocking against my ribs. Maybe it was coincidence, but it didn't feel like it. So I got back into my car and drove away faster than I should have. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that silver bell, the one swinging faintly when the wind passed. Something about it stayed in my mind, the kind of detail your brain latches onto when everything else feels unreal. A few days later, the car was gone, just an empty stretch of gravel and flattened weeds where it had been. I thought that would bring relief, but instead it left me uneasy. I kept looking for it every day, expecting it to come back. For a while, it didn't. Then one rainy evening, driving home late again, I saw it. Parked farther down the highway this time, headlights dimly on, angled toward the traffic as if waiting for someone. I drove past without slowing, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My reflection in the window looked distorted, the streetlights bending across the glass. I didn't look in the mirror. Not that night. So a week later, I took a different route to work, longer but quieter. It took me past fields and back roads, miles from the highway. I told myself I was done thinking about that car. But 2 mornings ago, while merging onto the main road again for the first time since then, I saw it in the median back in its original spot. Only this time it wasn't empty. There was a figure in the driver's seat. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But as I passed, the figure's head turned just slightly, following me. The motion was slow, deliberate. The face was shadowed, but I could see the outline of something small hanging from the mirror inside. A bell. Now I take the train whenever I can. I sold my car last month. It wasn't anything supernatural that convinced me, not really. It was something quieter, simpler. The day I turned in my plates, the clerk behind the counter smiled and typed my number into her system. Then she paused, frowned, and said softly, "That's strange." I asked her what was wrong. She looked up at me and said, "This plate number was reported as part of an accident years ago. Single car crash. The vehicle was found in a highway median." She gave me the date. It was the same day I bought my car. I was driving cross-country that summer, taking back roads on purpose. I've always preferred the quiet ones. No traffic, no billboards every half mile, just me, my music, and the kind of long, empty stretches where your thoughts echo louder than the engine. It was sometime around midnight when I hit the part of the route I'd been warned about, an old stretch of highway that hadn't been updated on GPS maps in years. I remember how still the night felt out there, how the sky was so clear it almost seemed unreal. I'd been driving for hours without seeing another car when the road ahead dipped, curved slightly left, and that's when I saw it, an overpass, pale in the distance, rising out of the dark. At first, I didn't think much of it. Overpasses are common enough, especially on older highways where roads crisscross each other like veins, but something about this one felt off. It wasn't the structure itself. It looked sturdy, made of concrete with worn railings and faded graffiti. It was the silence underneath it. The moment I got close, my radio fizzed into static, and even the hum of the engine sounded muffled, like the air was thicker there. The headlights swept across the pillars, and I saw something scratched into one of them, a single word repeated over and over: "Stop." I eased off the gas without meaning to, eyes flicking between the writing and the space beneath the bridge. The shadows pooled thicker there, almost oily. For a moment I thought I saw movement, a flicker of something pale, like fabric catching the light. I told myself it was just the glare from my own beams. I'd been driving too long, maybe dozing off a little, so I pressed on, driving beneath it. The instant I passed under, the temperature in the car dropped. Not gradually, like a wave of cold air had been waiting. My breath fogged faintly against the glass, and for a second my headlights dimmed just slightly, like something had drawn power from them. Then as quickly as it came, it was gone. The warmth returned, the hum of the tires back to normal. I let out a shaky laugh, rubbing the goosebumps off my arms, and kept going. 5 minutes later, I realized something strange. The mile marker on the right side of the road read 42. I had passed that marker about 10 minutes earlier before the overpass. I thought maybe I'd misread it, exhaustion can do that. But then another appeared, same number. I slowed down, leaned forward to see better, and my stomach turned cold. There was the overpass again. Same angle, same faint graffiti on the pillar, same stretch of flat land leading into it. I blinked hard, even checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see another car that could prove I wasn't losing it, nothing but my taillights reflecting back at me. I told myself it must have been a loop in the road, some kind of circular route. But when I pulled out my GPS, the map was blank. No signal. Just that endless blue arrow sitting still even as I moved. This time I slowed almost to a crawl as I approached the bridge. The same word stop was still there, but the letters looked fresher now, sharper, like they'd just been carved. I leaned a bit closer, trying to catch any sign of vandal paint or etching. Then I noticed something new. Beneath the graffiti in smaller letters was a name. Cole. That name didn't mean anything to me, but the way it was written, not spray painted, but scratched deep, made something in my gut twist. I hesitated only a moment before driving under again. The cold returned, heavier this time, like the air was pressing in on the cabin. I heard something faint, a knock, not from the outside, but from the inside of the car. I froze, hands locked on the steering wheel. The knocking came again, soft, rhythmic, from somewhere near the back seat. I didn't turn around. I told myself it was the suspension or a loose thermos rolling around. The kind of sound you can explain if you try hard enough, but it didn't stop. It kept tapping, slow and deliberate, almost like someone testing the glass with their knuckles. I whispered, "Don't look," under my breath. I don't know why, maybe I thought saying it out loud would make it true. Then the radio came to life again, just static at first, then a faint voice breaking through, a man's voice, low, almost calm. "You didn't stop." My heart nearly stopped. I slammed the volume down, breathing hard. The voice was gone, but the radio light flickered like it was alive. I pressed the accelerator, tires squealing slightly on the cold asphalt. Within seconds, I was clear of the bridge, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The landscape outside the windows looked wrong, the hills sharper, the sky darker, the road lines faded like an old photograph. When I finally saw another car, I almost cried from relief. It was an old sedan coming from the opposite direction. I flashed my headlights twice, the signal every driver knows, danger ahead. The car didn't respond. As we passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver. The light hit his face just enough to see that his eyes were wide open, unblinking, and his hands gripped the wheel so tightly the knuckles were white. I turned to watch him in the mirror, and that's when I saw it. There was no reflection of the overpass behind him, just flat, empty land. By the time I made it to the next rest stop, the GPS had come back online. I scrolled through the map trying to find the overpass. Nothing. No crossings, no bridges, not even a note about construction, just uninterrupted highway. I asked the cashier inside if there was an old bridge or overpass a few miles back. He looked confused, then said, "Not anymore. Collapsed back in the 60s. Killed 3 workers. They built a bypass instead." As I didn't sleep that night, I just sat in the cab of my car, staring out at the highway. Around 3 a.m., I turned on the radio again, static. I let it play for a while, half hopping, half dreading what I might hear. Then faintly through the noise came that same voice, quiet, patient, almost like a sigh. "You stopped too late." The next morning, when I drove that stretch again in daylight, I slowed where I remembered it being. There was nothing there. No overpass, no graffiti, not even the mile marker I'd passed twice. Just endless asphalt and flat desert stretching as far as the eye could see. But even now, when I drive long nights alone, my radio sometimes flickers with that same soft static. And every time it does, I catch myself checking the horizon for that overpass that wasn't there. The one that waits, somewhere just beyond the reach of the headlights for someone else who doesn't stop in time. Night has a way of revealing what daylight hides, the small sounds that suddenly matter, the quiet roads that seem endless, the memories that won't stay buried. Each story tonight was just a glimpse into that space where the ordinary turns unfamiliar, where the line between what we imagine and what follows us home grows thin. Maybe that's why we keep listening, not to feel safe, but to remember how easily safety disappears. If you've made it this far, it's because some part of you understands that kind of silence, the kind that fills a room after the story ends when you realize you've been holding your breath without meaning to. Maybe you've driven that same lonely highway or turned off a light just a little faster than usual. It's all right. Fear doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits quietly in the places we don't look. So before you drift off, let the noise fade and the darkness settle. If these stories kept you company tonight, you're welcome to return. There will always be more waiting here, whispered between the seconds before sleep. Until then, rest easy and remember, the world is never as empty as it sounds when the night grows still.